Wuchang Fallen Feathers can be a hard game, but it doesn't need to be. After finishing my first playthrough and playing it through my second time, I've noticed the game is so much easier now that I know exactly what to do and now that I know where everything is. So without further ado, let's talk about how you can get the best possible start if you're just starting out Wuchang Fallen Feathers and how you can make the game so much easier for yourself if you are struggling perhaps. Now the first thing you're going to notice is when you start the game is there is going to be an optional boss which you will see right off the bat. Now this boss is going to give you only one attempt at fighting it, and if you do manage to beat it, you'll get 5 free Mercury Essence, which is what you're going to need to level up. So essentially getting 5 free levels. That's a very big reward to start off with. So I would highly recommend you try do this if possible. If you don't end up beating and you do end up dying, the boss will no longer be available. So you will have to start a new game, which is not a big deal because it's obviously right in the starting area. So starting a new game at this point, you won't lose anything. But if you can, try beat this boss because you're going to get some nice rewards for it. It has very basic attack patterns, so it's not very difficult. Just make sure you're dodging and don't be too reckless. And after a couple of tries, you should be able to do it and you will get nicely rewarded for doing so, which will give you a nice head start. The next thing you're going to want to note is you're going to need to pick what weapon class you're going to want to use and what weapon you're going to want to stick with. I would highly recommend if you're a new player and you are, still getting used to the controls, the longsword is going to be the best all-round weapon. It's going to be very well balanced and it's also going to be a very good beginner weapon. That being said, when you look at weapons, it's also important to pick which weapon you want to go with because this is going to define your class. Now, don't worry, you will be able to respec at any point. So if later down the line you find a weapon that you prefer or another class you want to pick, you can do so without any cost, without any hassle. You can respec individual perks as you want, but I would recommend that you pick the longsword to begin with because it is going to be a well-balanced class. It's also important to note when you do look at these weapons, make sure that you are looking at the weapon scaling. Now you will notice the weapon scaling will have a little number next to it, like for example, strength 4 and maybe agility 2 or whatever those numbers are. The bigger the number, the more powerful the scaling is going to be into that stat. So let's say you have a weapon that says strength 5 and maybe agility 2. That means you want to put as many stats you can into strength because by doing this will increase the weapon's damage. Likewise, if the weapon has the stat of, let's say, agility 5 and maybe only magic 1 or strength 1, then you're going to want to put stats into its agility because that's going to be the more powerful stat. And by doing so, you'll get a lot more damage. So just make sure that you are leveling up those stats. Now, you want to prioritize a stat that is going to give you the highest scaling, but also don't neglect the other stat, especially if it's convenient to pick up maybe nodes that are close by, and that will obviously give you some more damage. Speaking of increasing your damage, also very, very important that you are aware of your weapon mastery. This is going to be something that you can upgrade, and you can be able to upgrade every time you collect red feathers. Now, there are going to be different tiers of red feathers. You're going to get basic red feathers, you're going to get faint red feathers, brilliant red feathers, and whatever. And these you're going to find throughout the world. They're going to be typically found in either chests, they're going to be sometimes found on the floor. They're also going to be typically obtained by defeating mini bosses or sometimes even bosses themselves. And this is going to give you a reward that you will then be able to use to upgrade your weapon mastery. Now, you want to upgrade these weapon masteries whenever possible because by upgrading your weapon mastery, you are going to do significantly more damage with your weapon. And this is going to be essentially this game's version of upgrading your weapon itself. You're not going to have a blacksmith or anything in this game where you can upgrade your weapon. You're going to upgrade it through the skill tree by finding red feathers throughout the map and upgrading it through your skill tree. Now, mana potions are going to work in a similar manner. Mana potions are going to be upgraded in 2 ways, either by increasing the quantity of mana potions. You'll be able to find this on the left-hand side of your skill tree. And you can also upgrade the mana potion potency, which is going to increase the amount the mana potions are going to give you. Now, you can upgrade this by finding similar to the weapon masteries, but instead of red feathers, you're going to need to find things like lost remains, which you will then find inside of these big golden chests throughout the map. Just make sure you do end up exploring because these are typically going to be a little bit off the beaten path, and they will then allow you to upgrade your mana potions, which are very, very important because when you start the game, you only have 3 mana potions, which is very, very little, and you're going to definitely need to get as many of these as possible. So make sure that you are exploring in order to find these golden chests so you can upgrade your mana potions. Now, another thing you're also going to want to pick up on is that you are going to have something called Skyborn Might, and to increase your Skyborn Might, you also need to increase this by going to the left-hand side of your skill tree. There'll be a Skyborn Core node, which you will then be able to upgrade, which will give you more Skyborn Might capacity. Now, the Skyborn Might is basically this game's version of mana, and this is going to allow you to store charges, which you can then spend by either spending it on spells or using it to increase the attack potency of your disciplines, which you can also access at any time, but they will be obviously a lot stronger if you have Skyborn Might in order to do so. Skyborn Might is going to be a very important thing. The game is only going to start you with 1 Skyborn Might, but you definitely want to increase this as much as you can in the beginning. So just upgrade a few of those nodes on the left-hand side of the skill tree. They're very easy. They're on the main path. So just upgrade those whenever you can because it's going to allow you to have more Skyborn Might, which is very, very valuable. Now, another thing that is going to be very valuable, which is also going to tie into Skyborn Might, is stance breaks. Now, if you don't know what stance breaks are, it's essentially a way to stun enemies. And there's typically 2 ways to stun enemies. You're going to notice there's going to be a little meter on the center of the screen. It's going to be like a little circle that you will then be able to fill up. And this is going to fill up by attacking enemies repeatedly. The more of these attacks you do, the more it will fill up, and when it's full, they will get stunned. Now, if you don't attack enemies for a long duration of time, this will reset, so make sure that you are putting a little bit of damage in at least every now and then, just to keep the timer from resetting. But it's also very valuable to note, if you do a heavy attack, or sometimes your discipline attacks from behind enemies, you will be able to stun them almost immediately, and this works on bosses as well. As long as they're not gigantic bosses, the big bosses, sometimes they don't get stunned like this, but the humanoid bosses especially, they are going to typically get stunned with one single heavy attack from behind, and that is going to be a very, very easy way to defeat enemies. Not just bosses, but also just regular enemies in general. When you hit them from behind with a heavy attack, they are going to be stunned. Now, it's also very important to note, you can make your heavy attacks go a lot faster. Every weapon in the skill tree is going to have pretty much a perk that you can pick up quite early on, which is going to allow you to do your heavy attacks much faster if you have at least one Skyborn Might available. So you can earn Skyborn Might typically by doing a perfect dodge. If you do a perfect dodge, you're going to have at least one Skyborn Might, which you can then spend to do a heavy attack. So what I like to do when it comes down to some difficult bosses or enemies you're having a difficult time with is basically you dodge out of the way when they attack you and immediately turn around when they are recovering from their attack and do a heavy attack on them from behind, and this will stun them and allowing you to get a stance break, and this will let you do massive amounts of damage pretty much for free. And this works on so many bosses. This saved my life in so many situations in the game, and if you're struggling with the boss, this is going to be the single easiest way to deal with at least some of the smaller bosses or enemies in the game, and this makes your life so much easier. Use this if you're struggling, because this is going to be so much help, and it made my second playthrough so much easier since I've been doing this more. Now, speaking of difficult bosses, there are going to be two you're going to face fairly early on in the game, and they might give you some trouble. The first one you're going to face is going to be at the bottom of the Shoe Temple. It's going to be called the Great Centipede, and this one is going to be fairly challenging if you're just starting out. However, there is 4 pillars you'll notice around this arena, and if you lead the boss attacks and you kind of stand behind the pillar, the boss will end up trying to lunge or attack you, and if it hits the pillar, the boss will take a bit of damage and it will get stunned. So you get 4 essentially free stuns on the boss, and that is going to make life a lot easier. So just make sure you're using those pillars to help beat the boss. Now, soon after you end up fighting this boss, there is going to be another boss you're going to face. This one is going to be one of the most troublesome bosses in the game, and this one I think a lot of players are going to be stuck with. This one is definitely quite challenging. This one is going to be called Hongland, or Commander Hongland, and she is going to be absolutely ridiculous for at least how early in the game you face her. She has an overwhelming attack speed. She does so many attacks in very short succession, and she can be a very, very difficult boss when you face her early on if you're unprepared. But there luckily is a very easy way to deal with it, and that is going to be by making use of blocking and parrying. It sounds simple, it sounds like a no-brainer, but unfortunately blocking and parrying in this game is something that most weapons you're going to need to equip as a discipline, so you're going to have to unlock it in the skill tree, and once you unlock it, you will then only be able to use blocking and parrying, and the blocking and parrying is going to be almost essential to beating this boss, because otherwise you're going to be in for a very, very rough time. Now, the way you can beat this boss fairly easily is what you can do is essentially she's going to have an attack where she lunges towards you like kind of like a spear or a dart, and that is going to be your opening to do a block. You won't be able to block melee combat, so when she does end up using her fists and kicking around, that you cannot block, so don't even try blocking that. But the easiest way to do it is kind of put some distance between you and her, because when she is far away from you, she will try to do a lunging attack, and this is going to be very easily predictable, very easy to block. And when you do end up blocking it, you can do a counter attack, assuming you've leveled it up in your skill tree, and this will allow you to get kind of free hits in. So just go back, block, to attack, move away from her, and do this over and over again, and this makes the fight so much easier. The fight goes from being practically impossible to very, very easy just by doing that. If you are stuck on Hongland, just make sure you have blocking and parrying equipped as your discipline skill. Now, another very valuable thing that you're definitely going to want to pick up on, I think this is one of the best weapons in the game. This is the weapon that I use right from the beginning all the way to the final boss of the game, and that is going to be the Lashing Whip Longsword. This sword is absolutely amazing. It has a very cool animation. The sword kind of like extends and shrinks, and this is going to be kind of like a sword that doubles as a whip, which is going to give you very nice range. And the nice thing about this whip effect is that when you do end up doing attacks with the sword is kind of going to extend outwards, act as a whip, and this is going to give you so much flexibility in your attack combos. Now, the Lashing Whip you can find beneath the Shoe Temple. To access the bottom of the Shoe Temple, you're going to need to defeat the boss at the top of the Shoe Temple. He's going to be the priest of the area. If you beat him, he'll give you a key. You can then use the key to unlock the bottom undercroft of the Shoe Temple, and this sword is going to be pretty much just laying on the ground on the main path. It's pretty hard to miss, but just make sure you do end up using this sword if you do play a longsword build. It's a very, very powerful sword. It scales with, I believe, agility and strength, and it is a sword you can take with you all the way to the very end game. It's very cool and it's very powerful, so make sure you pick that up. Another important thing you're going to want to be on the lookout for is going to be the bamboo sprouts. You're going to see these they're going to be like little green bamboo sprouts. They're going to pop up on the map every now and then. They're going to try run away from you. If you can't kill them fast enough, they will despawn. You can make them respawn again by resting at a site of grace or a shrine or whatever you want to call it. And if you do end up doing this, it will then respawn. It gives you like a few seconds to kill it. And if you do end up killing it, you get a bamboo sprout. Now, what can you do with these bamboo sprouts? Essentially, there's going to be a merchant, which is exclusively only going to accept these bamboo sprouts as their currency. And you can find this merchant in a couple of places. The first place you're going to be able to find him in the beginning of the game is going to be in a little temple area. You're going to be able to find this kind of like panda bear, and this will then unlock the shopkeeper that you can then trade with. Sometimes these items are going to be quite valuable, especially when you do end up finding him in the later stage of the game. You will see him in other places throughout the game as well, and he's going to sell you some very powerful items. So make sure that you are collecting these bamboo sprouts, because especially in the late game, they are going to be quite needed. Now, next thing you're going to want to be on the lookout for is every time you defeat a boss, you are going to be awarded with a boss item, and these boss items can be traded to a shopkeeper who will then unlock you the boss gear or armor sets that you can then buy from him, which aren't actually that expensive. They're fairly cheap, relatively speaking, and they will then give you the armor sets. Now, the really important thing about this is every single piece of armor has its benefits. There's no one piece of armor that is objectively in all aspects better than another piece of armor. Every piece of gear has some benefit over another piece. So you're never going to just stick with one piece throughout the whole game. You're going to need to mix and match these armor sets based on what boss you're encountering. If you're facing a boss that is going to have blunt damage, or it's going to be doing big, heavy, blunt attacks, you're going to want to use a piece of armor that has good blunt damage, but maybe neglects all the other stats. Or maybe the boss is going to have high corruption damage, or maybe high despair damage, or some kind of status like frost. Then you're going to want to use a piece of armor, or pieces of armor perhaps, that are going to give you more resistances to those ailments. So having as many pieces of armor as you can available is going to give you just more options when it comes to the general conflicts of the game, because certain areas are also going to have enemies that are going to gravitate towards certain types of ailments. Some areas you're going to have a lot of despair damage, some areas you're going to have a lot of corruption damage, and so on. So having armor sets available to you is always going to be very valuable. So I highly recommend, as soon as you beat the boss, go to the shopkeeper, turn in the item, and then buy the armor sets that you can from him, because it's going to be very, very valuable throughout your playthrough. Now, speaking of talking to people, it's going to be very important you socialize in this game, because these NPCs are going to typically unlock side quests, and you're going to want to be able to do these, because some of these NPCs are going to give you very valuable items when you do end up completing this side quest. And some of these NPCs are even going to lead to optional bosses, which are going to be something you don't want to miss out on. So when you can, just make sure that you are tracking these NPCs quests. And this game does luckily give you a way to kind of track these quests. It doesn't tell you where to go, but it does tell you when you've completed something. If you collect an item that you don't know what it's for, chances are it might be used for an NPC. So whenever you go to a shrine and you go to the fast travel thing, just make sure that you end up looking out for, little icons of NPCs on the fast travel locations, because when you see icons there, that means there is an NPC that you can turn an item into or complete a certain side quest, and that is going to be quite valuable. Overall, I think Wuchang Fallen Feathers is also going to be a game where you're going to want to explore as much as possible. Just make sure that you are going to every path you can, because areas are going to have a lot of secrets and a lot of rewards when you do end up exploring. So just make sure that you're constantly exploring everywhere you can, because it's going to allow you to not only level up, get more XP, beat enemies, but it's also going to unlock you a lot of rewards. Overall, the game can be so much easier for yourself if you do end up looking out for these things. The game is obviously designed to be a difficult game, but if you do end up following these instructions, it can be so much easier for you. Anyway, I hope this guide helped you. If you did end up learning something, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comment section below, what are you struggling with Wuchang Fallen Feathers, and what have you discovered that made your playthrough a lot easier? I'd love to find out. Anyway, I'll see you guys again next time. Take care, everyone, and bye bye.